Recording. Kia ora and welcome to everyone who is here for the Rise 2025 Real Talk series. And I'm so blessed to know amazing Indigenous women all around the world, and we're joined here at this moment by Dawn Madahbee Leach, who is based in Toronto.
Actually, north of Toronto. I live in a First Nation community about 5 hours north of Toronto, but I spent a lot of time in Toronto. But for people from around the world, I'm in central Canada, and
Yes.
near the hub of Canada's main, financial and commercial activity.
Yeah, wonderful. And so, Dawn, thank you so much for taking time out. I know that you've got a lot of work and mahi on with the UN and the OECD and your Canadian High Commission, and you'll be, so thank you for taking time out to share what you know as a amazing Indigenous woman about financial well-being and how that has, and money, and how that has played out in your life. And I know you're also a businesswoman, so you've got a very commercial way of thinking, but very steeped in your culture. So maybe just talking a little bit more about your connection as an Indigenous woman first.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I want to start by saying a little bit about the fact that I've grown up in the First Nation community with strong female influences. I'm a Anishinaabe Kwe. That's the nation I belong to, is the Anishinaabe Nation. And so I grew up in my home community surrounded by my people. And but in the time that I grew up, our community was filled with poverty. And we had a lot of social issues. And my mother attended residential school, which is a history I think shared by many Indigenous people around the world about how our children were taken from our families. And anyway, we've had to kind of live with the results of that. But I think despite that, we've thrived. And so I'm here to talk today about a lot of the ways that we have thrived, but also even with the poverty, even with the social issues, the women in my life who've guided me have been strong and have taught me how to survive and have lifted me up and lifted all women up, which is what my role is now, is to lift other women. Mm-hmm. So, I come from that background. My everyday job for the past almost 32 years now has been running an Aboriginal financial institution that invests in Indigenous businesses. And I'm happy to report that over the past 2 years, the majority of our investments, more than 52%, have been in Indigenous women-owned businesses.
Yay.
So yes, I know that's pretty exciting. And I have to tell you, it wasn't a concerted effort. It's just that more Indigenous women are interested in becoming business people in Canada. So I think that's pretty exciting, and they're involved in businesses in every field that you can think of, whether it's in fashion, whether it's in online types of businesses and services that they're providing. For example, we have one woman who's providing services to veterans in terms of helping them with housing, getting discount services for them, and just generally helping them in Canada. And I'm pretty excited about the work that she's been doing for the past few years in that regard. We have women in construction and in mining that are providing services in all the different sectors, but running their own construction businesses. It's really exciting. And these women are doing very well financially.
Yeah,
and so I think that's a great thing. And in my work too, I've been able to become financially secure, because that's something that I set my mind on when I was a child. When I started working, I always made sure that I didn't depend on anybody. I knew, for example, my mother, I was the oldest of 11, by the way, and I
Yes.
knew that she couldn't afford a lot of things for me. So I worked, raised, earned my own money, and I was always independent. I even bought things like my own iron, my own suitcases, and those were things that were my goal as a young person, to be self-sufficient. And even early in my life, I always thought that even though I think I never wanted to be dependent on anybody, even my husband. I always made sure I had my own resources. And I'm so glad that I've done that all these years, because there's a real sense of security when you have your own financial resources. And today I can say, I drive a very nice car. I have some designer clothes, shoes, and I feel confident that I can buy whatever I need to buy. Of course, my interest is always buying from Indigenous women designers. Well, Indigenous designers overall, but primarily they're mainly women. So I like investing in our own people who've done great things. So, and I have the ability and confidence to do that, because I've, again, made sure I've always been financially independent.
So thank you for sharing that, Dawn. And I really, as I listen to you about your upbringing, 11 in your family, and really striving to have your independence, has really set you up. But really the thing that I heard was around the strong influences, the women that you had around you. And so with our listeners who are tuning into, all the women all around the world, what are your cultural beliefs about money? Because there are conversations that I hear around not focusing on the money, and still I hear people say money is the root of all evil, and so there's this real tension I hear in Indigenous cultures about having both. Is that possible, Dawn?
Oh,
In your
yes, yeah. I definitely think that making money is a good thing. There's always this perception that Indigenous people are always taking from the government. We don't really see it that way. This is, a lot of these external governments have been living off of our resources for years. They've been exploiting our resources for years. I think it's time for us to take control out of all of our resources. And what we normally do when we're doing this, we give back. And that's the coolest thing about all of the Indigenous women I know that are successful in their careers and their businesses. They always give back. And I think, again, of when I was growing up and I earned my own money, babysitting or, working part-time at a little store or whatever I could do, I still remember buying, my little sister's dresses. I always, giving back or helping a friend, who might be short on some money to do some things that they needed to do, or even to have a lunch at school. They didn't have lunch. Those are it gave me that opportunity. And I think that's the kind of concept I think we need to put in our minds, is that when we have money, we can contribute back to our communities. And we do. I know that the women who've been involved in businesses and been successful in their careers, they're always giving back to our people and sharing those resources. And I think that that's the most important thing, gives us that opportunity to share it and help our communities, and also to be role models for our young women.
Yes.
My goodness, I always remember I bought a really nice vehicle when I was younger. It was a Mercedes. And so I took my young nieces and nephews for a ride, and they were so quiet at first. Then they were having, they said, they told me this, and I'll never forget. They said, you know what? This is so exciting to know that an Indigenous person can buy a nice vehicle like this, that we can do that too someday. And just to kind of open those doors and help them see what they can do and go beyond. But I think that, for me, when I bought that vehicle, I always think that I bought it for safety purposes, and it doesn't really cost that much more than the standard North American vehicles that they have out there. It really doesn't. It costs the same, but it was just the perception of the name. And I think that when they saw that an Indigenous person could own something like that, that it gave them something to aspire to, but also share. Because I let them drive, and have the experience, and they were just so excited. I always remember that. But there's nothing wrong with earning money, because we give back. I know a lot of communities who earn money here in Canada, the First Nations that are successful. Well, the first thing that they do is they build centers for our culture, so our own people can have a place where they can still keep the culture alive. They invest in our language. They invest in things that are important to our people. And I know that as Indigenous people, that's what we do when we earn money ourselves. We give back, any money that I have, I can give back to, some of our traditional teachers who might not have the means to maybe travel to a conference or something. I can help with that. I can help them to do different things. So, this gives us that ability to do that.
Yeah. And so you talk about sort of the mindset of staying strong in that space, and, having, our cultural values, our, financial well-being and everything that comes with that, our careers, our businesses. What other practical things that you do, Dawn, to really stay in that space of knowing that you're going to be financially independent for the rest of your life? What are the practical things that you do, and what can you share that would be helpful?
Well, I think that, of course, making sure that I understand finances, and of course I do, because that's what I'm in the business of doing, of providing loans and funding to Indigenous businesses. That's what I do every day. So I know how credit works, and I think that was a really important thing for me to know, is to become financially literate.
Yes.
To understand that there's nothing wrong with learning about how financial systems work, how credit works, how savings work. I think that's the most important thing. And so if there's an opportunity to take financial literacy training, I think that's important for everyone, because oftentimes when we started this organization as a financial institution for Indigenous people, many of the people we worked with didn't have a credit record at all. No credit history. And so they didn't have credit. They couldn't get credit because they'd never borrowed before. And it was something new. But through the work that we've done, we've helped them to learn about credit, but also to get a credit rating so that they can get credit elsewhere and establish a good credit record. So that's one of the things that we did. And I think that's so important for our people to understand, is that you have to take every opportunity. And as a matter of fact, our communities are now offering the financial literacy training, which I think is important, because our communities are generating revenues now. And so one of the things that they do in the communities, as the communities develop businesses, people are becoming more interested in learning how much money their community business is making, because they want to keep them in line. So they want to learn how to read a balance sheet and financial statements and ask the right questions. So, having financial literacy training for all of our people is really, really key. And I think that that's important. I just wanted to go back for a second, though, when you talked about cultural aspects too, about it for Indigenous people. You know, there are some things that are very sacred. For example, we as Indigenous people here in my region, as the Anishinaabe people, one of the things that we you know, we've been guided by our elders in terms of cultural integrity guidelines to ensure that we never sell Indigenous ceremonies or medicines, our sacred medicines. So those are always the things that we protect for ourselves, because a lot of people want to take away what we have. But we've always made sure that we've been guided by our elders and what cultural integrity is. And so because of that guidance from our elders, I've always been, you know, taught that also when we have something, we give back. And that's what we're supposed to do. So any success that I've had, or our Indigenous businesses have had, they always give back, because that's part of our teachings. And I know that that's why I love helping to create new Indigenous businesses, because they're the ones who contribute to our children's sports teams. They contribute to school bursaries. They're the ones who always give back, because that's part of who we are as Indigenous people. We're different from other cultures in that way. I think Indigenous people around the world share those same values and teachings.
Yes, I would agree with you 100%. And I think, and then if we are women and we're Indigenous, I think that's also another uniqueness that we share. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, because it's the women who oftentimes make the financial decisions for families. And I know it's the Indigenous women in business who are the ones who are looking after their employees. They're better managers, I often find. They're the ones who really care and make sure that their employees are also lifted up, right? I think that that's an important thing. I think also, you know, our Indigenous women are better at problem solving and looking at the social aspects of our communities and our people, making sure that you know, our culture is the base of the work that we do. I think that that's really, really important. I also, you know, I think of things like our persistence and, you know, not taking no for an answer. I think that that's something that most of us have learned from our grandmothers, right? They're usually the tough leaders and women in our community are the grandmothers. So I think that that's an important part of the work that we do.
Great.
Oh, I have a visitor here.
Oh, hello.
Walking through.
We love that. We love that. This is real talk. This is real talk. Yeah. So so if we shift into what does the future look like? Yeah, from you know, all of the work that you've been doing in this space around supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs in the financial capability and literacy, and seeing them thrive, you know, seeing startups thrive. What is the future? What do we need to be thinking about in the future? So let's say someone has an idea and they don't know how to take that idea to market. What kind of advice from a financial professional would you be giving them?
I always advise people to start a business based on the person's natural talents, gifts, and skills. The Creator has given each and every one of us a special talents or skill or gift. And when you look at what that is and you figure out what it is, and sometimes you have to talk to the elders in the community, or your circle of women friends are oftentimes the most blunt and straightforward with you to let you know what these abilities that you have. And I think if you build a business around that, I think that's the best way to start. Then you just do your research on it. You go to school on other people who are doing that kind of thing. Sometimes volunteering for an organization that works in that sector too, doing some volunteer work, I think being on a committee or a board is a good place to go to school on other people, because you're learning from their leadership skills too and how they do things. So I've always felt that my involvement on when I started out on committees has led to me learning so much more about leading and governance and all of that, and finances. That it's really, really helped me. And now I'm on different boards across Canada. So I think that those types of things, learning about your gifts, volunteering, going to school on other people who are doing these kinds of things, building a network, I think that's what I usually advise people when they're starting out.
Yes. And you're part of other exciting initiatives, especially UN Indigenous rights for Indigenous people, OECD. What are you noticing that has changed since maybe you started, in your career, and what's different today for us, and what should we be aware of?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that today there's a real need for us to start developing our own institutions. And, we have institutions that are controlled by us. And I think women, I know in the work that I do, I'm surrounded by some great, powerful Indigenous women. And we're making some changes. One of the things, for example, in Canada that we're doing is usually it was the government who developed a national Indigenous economic strategy. We said, not anymore. We're going to collaborate amongst our own people, our own national Indigenous economic organizations, and we're going to develop the national economic strategy for Canada. We're not letting the government do those kinds of things, but the government can support us. But now we're going to have the pen, because we're the ones who are the best able and know what's needed. It's not the government can. And I think the more we start turning around that mindset of the government has to do this for us, or wait for the government to do it. We can't wait. I always try to get our people to think of, well, what can we do right now without government? And there's a whole lot of things we can do right now without government. And it's just like in our areas, when we're looking at a business, a lot of communities have been reliant on external people setting up businesses in our community. Well, why can't we just do that? There's nothing stopping us from doing those kinds of things. And so it's changing our own mindset and realizing that we have the ability, even if we start small and build it up. I think that's the best way to start, but we can do it. We have the capacity now. We have the sophistication. We have more educated young people. And I think we should be starting to do these things on our own. So that's what I'm seeing, even at the global level. Knowing people like you has been such an inspiration, because we can build off of each other's successes. We didn't know before what we didn't know. So we didn't know what the Maori people were doing that we could learn from in Canada and adopt here, or what our Sami people in the Northern Europe are doing that we can learn from, because they have, I like what the Maori are doing in terms of fisheries and seafood. And so many other areas. I love what the Sami people are doing with establishing their own parliaments.
I love that.
I know, and in Canada, we have our own banks that are Indigenous owned banks, and we have our own financial institutions. I think that's something that other places can learn from. And I really like what Australia is doing with regards to procurement, and from the private and public sectors with Supply Nation. We're actually looking at a Supply Nation Canada now. because we
Yes.
learned from our brothers and sisters there in Australia. So I think opening up the world and what you're doing by sharing our leading practices with everybody is going to lift everybody up and carry everyone forward to see what we can do together, but also give us ideas and what we can do for our own communities and our own people based on, you know, some of the successes or even the projects that weren't a success. We can learn from our mistakes and not to be afraid to share our mistakes and learn from that too. I think that that's really important.
Yeah, 100%. And so one of the beautiful women just yesterday that I interviewed is Crystal Kinsella Christie, who has been winning all the awards for the Supply Diversity Awards since 2017 and has, you know, is just flying. You know, I think that her employment or her employees has grown threefold. She only started in 2015.
I know.
So she's so knowing these women who are real pioneers in the spaces of things like procurement, financial, you know, well-being, and making sure that people have the right capability. I mean, the world really is our oyster, isn't it, Dawn?
It is, absolutely. And I think the more that we talk with each other and lift each other up and support each other, I think a lot of our Indigenous women businesses can go global and are
Yes.
going global. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's so important that we support each other because, again, we all come from pretty much the same backgrounds. We've all struggled. We've all experienced poverty. And I think that you know what, to me, that's a strength. You know, I don't look at that as a negative. I really think that that's a strength and that can carry us going forward. And to me, it makes whatever we do more meaningful, and we're blazing new trails because of that. And I'm so proud of the women that I've met from all over the world who are doing all this amazing work. But even if you're just doing that work in your community, that's impactful too. I don't want to just say, oh, look global and it's great, but there's women doing impactful things in our own communities, which, you know, we can't forget about. That's so important. And that's the basis and foundation on which we grow. So I think we need to remember that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, Dawn, as we start to wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you really want to leave our audience with? Some gems or any way that we can support you and your work? What would you like to share as we start to close up?
Well, I think, you know, some of the things that I really wanted to encourage Indigenous women about, you know, we already volunteer in our communities, but I think we should start putting our name in for the larger opportunities out there. I think, you know, not being afraid to become involved in a board, but you need to start taking governance training and know what that's all about, what your legal responsibilities are in joining boards, because I think we have a lot of influence that we're not exercising.
Yes.
To me, I think, for example, in resource development, if we got involved in those kinds of boards, we could make sure that we can help lead the way so that these companies are more environmentally conscious, that they're more focused on being good employers for the people, that they're good at being better socially responsible for the communities that they work in. That's those are the strengths that we could be in being on these boards. And I think don't be shy to look at that possibility and step up and actually put it out there. Tell people, well, I'm interested in being on your board. I think we need to do that. And that's starting to get them to think. And I know one of your reports shows that when women are on boards, that those companies, and by the way, and other like Indigenous people, it actually shows that there's been more profitability in those boards when Indigenous people, and especially women, are parts of those boards. So I think we should start promoting that report a little bit more. I think that that's an important thing to remember. But I also think that I went to a presentation by Michelle Obama, and she talked about a couple of things that I want to leave with everyone, is that sometimes women don't support other women, she said, and she feels that's because we sometimes see in other women our own faults. We see our own weaknesses, and so sometimes we don't support them because we see those kinds of things. But we have to change that and see the strengths, our own strengths. And we got to when we feel bad about ourselves, we feel bad about other women. And we can't do that anymore. We got to see the strengths. We got to help. And remember, nobody's perfect in this world. Nobody. So we need to help lift up other women. We need to make a conscious effort to do that. Whenever we talk about women, we should talk about the positive things that we've done, and brag about the work that other women are doing. I think that's what we need to do going forward. And I like what was done. There was in Australia, and they have an organization called NAIDOC there that has different themes to celebrate Indigenous people. But a couple of years ago, their theme was, "Because of her, we can." I really love that. And I think we need to showcase those women who have opened doors for us, who have blazed trails, but also we need that for our young women. There's issues around the world today that impact, and in Canada here, we have a report that came about because of the 1,500 missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Yes.
And if we don't teach our young women that there's other possibilities and opportunities for them, then we're always going to be a victim. But we don't need to be. We need to empower our young women. And I think going forward, remembering that we talk positively about about other women, and the only way to do that is to heal ourselves, I guess, but also to see positive things on ourselves and focus on that, so that we can raise up other women too, and build them up, and remember that because of her we can.
Yeah, because of you, Dawn, we can.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
And
you.
Thank you. And I just think that that's a wonderful message, because if you looked at all the research and the stats, you probably wouldn't get up in the morning. When I was been writing this book for women, about women, honestly, after I'd read all the research, I'm like, oh my God, we need a medal just for turning up and getting out of bed in the morning. And it's about reframing and refocusing on exactly what you're saying. How do we lift each other up? How do we amplify your message, Dawn, and Crystal's message, and my message, and all these young women's message? And this is, I thought this is one way that I can really focus on financial well-being, and really be specific about supporting Indigenous women, so we can all do this stuff. I mean, I didn't think about this till about a week ago when I messaged you. I was like, I really need to have more conversations with these women that I've met all over the world who have inspired me, and how can we give back? And so, this doesn't take much more than asking, the groups of women that on a topic that you're passionate about. And technology allows us to do that. And so I'll be sharing this, Dawn. How can people stay in touch with you? If they're like, wow, I really love Dawn's story, I'm living in Toronto or Canada, and I'd really like to know more, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, of course, by email. And I'm on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter, Facebook. So if people want to find me there, but if anyone wants to email me at Dawn or Madahbee Leach at wabatech.com. Now that takes a lot of spelling it out, but I think if you just Google me,
Yes.
you'll find a lot of my contacts and links. So,
and what I'll do is I'll share those with when we share
oh
your
yes, please do. I would like you to
interview.
do that.
Yeah, if that's okay with you. But I really wanted to say I'm excited about all the other work that you've got that we talked about, and how can I support you as you travel, to this part of the world.
Yes.
I don't think I'm in your part of the world this year coming. I was last year, but hey, you never know. You never know.
You never know, exactly. So I look
Yeah.
forward to staying in touch and also seeing what we could do to raise other women up, because that's what we
Yes.
need to do.
Yes, absolutely. And please pass on all my regards and love to Reggie as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I know he'll appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Dawn, for all your
And
time, and you are amazing.
I love you. Thank you.
Love. Bye. Bye.
Bye for now.